It was just supposed to be a normal Tuesday morning. The kind where you grab a cup of coffee, check your emails, and maybe curse the traffic a little on your way to work. That's exactly what Evan Miller expected when he stepped out of his apartment building in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. Just another day. But what he didn't know was that in less than 24 hours, his entire life would flip upside down, and all because he decided to help a homeless woman sitting quietly beside a dumpster near the bakery he visited every morning. Evan wasn't famous. He wasn't rich. He wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. He was just kind. A regular guy working as a freelance web developer, renting a tiny apartment in a half-crumbling building that was constantly one storm away from losing its roof. But Evan believed in one simple thing: if you see someone hurting, you help. That belief would cost him everything he thought was stable in his life. The woman he saw that day, wrapped in an oversized gray coat and clutching a half-empty water bottle, looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her name was Joy. She had deep lines on her face, but her eyes still carried something rare: dignity. Evan had passed her before, once or twice, always meaning to stop. But this morning was different. She looked worse. Pale. Faint. Like she might not make it through the afternoon. He didn't hesitate. He bought her a warm sandwich, gave her the coffee he hadn't even sipped yet, and crouched down beside her, asking if she needed help. She was hesitant, of course. Years on the street will do that to a person. But Evan didn't push. He just listened. Listened to her story, to how her husband had passed 2 winters ago, how she lost her job, and how one missed rent payment led to another and another until she was out on the street with no one left to call. He couldn't walk away. By noon, he had made up his mind. He brought her back to his apartment, gave her a clean blanket, a bowl of leftover chicken soup, and let her sleep on his couch. She barely spoke, except to say thank you. Over and over again. Evan didn't know why, but something in her voice made it hard to breathe. Maybe it was the way she still apologized for taking up space. Like she thought she didn't deserve warmth. That night, Evan posted on a local neighborhood forum, asking if anyone could donate clothes, toiletries, or even a motel voucher. He wasn't trying to go viral or make a scene, he just wanted someone to care. Maybe just one person. But the internet has a strange way of turning quiet moments into loud headlines. Some people praised him for doing what most wouldn't. But others, not so much. Comments flooded in, angry ones. Accusations that he was breaking building codes, violating health rules, endangering tenants. A few users even claimed he was hiding a criminal. Evan brushed it off, thinking it would pass. It didn't. By morning, everything changed. He was making eggs when the knock came. It wasn't a neighbor. It was the police. 2 officers at the door, hands on their belts, stone-faced. Someone had filed a formal complaint. They said Evan was harboring an unauthorized occupant in a residential zone. The word sounded like something out of a manual, cold and rehearsed. But when they cuffed him in front of Joy, without even letting him explain, it felt deeply personal. The ride to the station was silent. They didn't book him for long. Technically, he hadn't committed a crime, just violated a few city ordinances. They let him go with a warning. But the damage was already done. News had already hit social media. The local news station ran a segment that night: man arrested for taking in homeless woman, neighborhood concerned about safety. No one called to hear his side. He returned home just before midnight. Joy was gone. She'd left a note, handwritten and tear-stained, that simply read, "I'm sorry I caused trouble. Thank you for seeing me." Evan didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the real shock came. As the sun rose over the city, Evan stepped outside to find 3 massive yellow bulldozers parked across the street. Men in hard hats were walking around with clipboards, talking loudly, pointing at his building. A city-issued notice had been nailed to the front door. In bold red letters, "Scheduled demolition, 72 hours." His stomach dropped. His landlord hadn't called. No warning. No meetings. Just silence, and now this? He called city records. What he learned left him speechless. The permit for demolition had been pushed through overnight. Fast-tracked for community redevelopment. The same community that had labeled him a threat less than 24 hours ago. Coincidence? Maybe. But Evan didn't think so. He started digging. And what he found was even more disturbing. Turns out, the building he lived in was part of a block being eyed for a luxury apartment project. Plans had been in motion for months, but the paperwork had stalled, until his arrest made it convenient. The media coverage gave officials just the push they needed to clear the block, using public safety concerns to justify the teardown. And Evan? He was the perfect scapegoat. One man, one viral moment, and a woman who had already disappeared into the city's shadow. He had no idea where Joy was now, but he knew she didn't deserve to be erased. And he wasn't going to let his story be twisted into something it wasn't. He started filming everything. The bulldozers. The notices. The phone calls no one would return. He posted it all online, not for sympathy, but for the truth. And people started listening. Strangers began to message him. Some shared their own stories, of kindness punished, of people left behind. Others offered help. A retired lawyer. A city planner with a conscience. A woman who claimed she'd seen Joy at a church shelter 2 neighborhoods over. But just as Evan was starting to connect the dots, something else happened. Late one night, as he scrolled through emails, there was a knock at the door. Not police this time. Not a neighbor. Just a plain man in a dark coat, holding an envelope. And what was inside would change everything. Because the battle wasn't just about one apartment. Or one homeless woman. It was about something much, much bigger. And Evan had just stepped right into the middle of it. But he wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after everything. Not after Joy. Not until the truth was out. And what he would uncover next would shake the city to its core. Evan stared at the envelope in his hands, fingers trembling just a little. It wasn't heavy. It didn't have a name on it. Just plain white, sealed tight. The man who delivered it hadn't said a word, just handed it over and turned away like he didn't want to be seen too long in the hallway. Evan called after him, but the man disappeared down the stairs without a glance back. Inside the apartment, Evan set the envelope on the kitchen table and sat down across from it like it might explode. 1,000 thoughts swirled through his head. Was this some kind of legal notice? A threat? A warning? Or maybe, just maybe, something that could help him figure out what was really going on. He finally tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photo. No letterhead. No signature. The paper had just one line typed in the center. You were never supposed to talk to her. Evan blinked. His hands froze. That was it? Just one sentence? He picked up the photo. It was old, grainy, but clear enough. It showed a group of men in suits standing outside a high-rise building. One of them looked familiar. It took Evan a second to realize, it was the property manager of his building. The same man who had ignored his calls for days. Next to him stood someone Evan had never seen before, bald, square jaw, expensive-looking watch. And in the background, almost hidden, was something else. A logo. Bright gold letters on a sign, Wesley Urban Development. He'd heard of them. Wesley Urban Development wasn't just some small-time real estate firm. They were one of the biggest private developers in the city, maybe even the state. Known for flipping low-income neighborhoods into luxury condos. Known for pushing people out, quietly, quickly, and without much of a paper trail. And now, here they were, connected to his building. And Joy. But why? What did Joy have to do with a real estate empire? Evan pulled out his laptop and started digging again, this time going deeper. City permit archives, court filings, non-profit housing blogs. It took hours, but eventually, a pattern started to emerge. Over the past year, Wesley had filed more than a dozen fast-track permits for demolitions in low-income zones. And in almost every case, a strange event happened just before the permit was approved. A complaint filed. An arrest made. A safety violation logged. Enough to give the city a reason to clear the property. Evan was stunned. It looked like a game. A system. Target vulnerable people, generate just enough noise to create a problem, then swoop in with a solution, bulldozers and blank checks. And now, he was the noise. His kindness had created the perfect excuse for them to wipe out his building. But the question that kept burning in his mind was, why Joy? Who was she? He went back to the photo. Something about it kept nagging at him. The date on the back, stamped faintly in blue ink, was from nearly 7 years ago. Long before Evan had ever moved into the neighborhood. Which meant these plans had been in motion for years. He zoomed in on the man with the expensive watch. Later, Evan would learn his name was Mitchell Crane, Vice President of Acquisitions at Wesley. A man rarely seen in public. No social media. No interviews. Just a quiet power behind massive deals. But that night, Evan knew none of that. He only knew one thing: someone was trying to erase something. Or someone. And it had started the moment he brought Joy into his apartment. He reached out to the local church shelter the woman at the city planning office had mentioned. It took a while, but finally, a kind voice on the other end confirmed, yes, someone matching Joy's description had come in. She didn't stay long. Just a few hours. Said she was afraid to bring trouble and left. Evan left his number, begging them to call if she came back. Days passed. The bulldozers stayed parked. The city didn't respond to his emails. His landlord vanished into silence. And the envelope? Still sitting on his table, untouched since that night. Like it was daring him to keep pushing. Evan noticed a black car parked across the street. At first, he thought nothing of it. But then it was there again. And again. Same model. Same spot. Windows too dark to see inside. He tried to get close once, but it drove off before he could even cross the road. He told himself he was being paranoid. That maybe all of this was getting to him. But deep down, something didn't feel right. He wasn't just fighting a demolition anymore. He was pulling at the edge of something hidden. Something protected. Late one night, he got another message. This time, it was an email. No subject. No sender name. Just a line of text. Joy isn't who you think she is. Stop before you ruin both your lives. Evan felt a chill creep up his spine. Was it a threat? A warning? Or a clue? He read it over and over. Joy wasn't who he thought. What did that mean? He thought about her eyes again, how tired they looked, but how alert. Like someone used to watching their back. She had said she lost her job. That she had no family. But now, he wasn't so sure. What if Joy hadn't just fallen through the cracks? What if she was pushed? What if she had seen something? Or worse, knew something? Maybe this wasn't about charity at all. Maybe Evan had stepped into the middle of a cover-up. He needed help. The next morning, he met with the retired lawyer who'd reached out. Her name was Marie Bell, fierce, sharp, didn't waste time on pleasantries. She'd once fought developers just like Wesley and had the battle scars to prove it. When Evan showed her the envelope and the photo, she just nodded like it confirmed everything she already suspected. This isn't just about buildings, she said. It's about people being moved like pieces on a board. And that woman you helped? They're scared of her for a reason. But I don't even know why, Evan said quietly. Marie leaned in, serious. Then find out. Fast. But time was running out. The 72-hour notice was down to its final day. The noise from the street below had grown louder, construction crews assembling fences, taping off sidewalks. Men in reflective vests wandered the building, marking windows with chalk. And still, no word from Joy. But Evan wasn't giving up. Because something told him this wasn't just his story anymore. It was hers too. And whatever secret she carried, someone was willing to bury an entire building to keep it hidden. Evan barely slept. Each hour seemed heavier than the last, and outside, the sound of metal clinking and engines humming only grew louder. The fence was up now, tall, ugly, and wrapped in black tarp to block the view. Construction signs had appeared on every corner of the block, like warning flags. The air felt different. Tense. Like he kept checking his phone. No missed calls. No texts. Still no word from Joy. He even went back to the shelter, stood outside for hours hoping she'd return. No one had seen her since the night she left. The shelter director, a quiet woman named Lydia, said she'd keep watch. She looked at Evan with a softness that told him she understood. That she believed him, even if the world didn't. Back at the apartment, Marie Bell, the retired lawyer, had started pulling documents. City contracts. Land purchase agreements. Inspection reports. And what they found only made things worse. Wesley Urban Development had secured a blight waiver on the building. It meant they didn't need tenant approval for demolition. It was meant for unsafe, abandoned properties, places too dangerous to occupy. But Evan's building wasn't abandoned. People lived there. Families. Kids. One woman on the third floor had been there for 22 years. But with the blight waiver, the law treated the place like it was already rubble. Marie kept shaking her head. "This is how they do it," she muttered. "Make a building look like a risk, then swoop in like they're doing the city a favor. But it's never about safety. It's about profit." Evan knew she was right. But something still didn't make sense. If it was just about money, why go this far? Why send an envelope? Why follow him? And why was Joy the trigger? That night, Evan received another anonymous email. No text this time, just a video file. He hesitated, then played it. The footage was shaky, grainy, like it had been recorded on an old phone. The camera was aimed at a table in a small, dimly lit room. Sitting at that table, looking thinner and more exhausted than ever, was Joy. Her voice cracked in the video. "I told them what I knew," she whispered. "But they didn't want the truth. They wanted silence." The video ended there. Evan sat frozen. She had been talking to someone. But who? And what truth? He showed it to Marie. Her face went pale. "That's not a shelter. That's an interrogation room," she said quietly. "But not police. Private." They both knew what that meant. Wesley Urban Development wasn't just tearing down buildings. They were scrubbing stories. Erasing people. Joy had seen something, maybe years ago, something that still made her a threat. And now, she was being hunted not for what she did, but for what she remembered. Evan started digging into old city council reports. Buried in the minutes from 7 years back was a strange case. A housing audit. A whistleblower had accused a major developer, unnamed in the report, of using unlicensed contractors to renovate affordable housing units. The buildings were unstable. 2 collapsed. 1 fire. 3 deaths. The whistleblower vanished. The case was closed without charges. The year? The same year the photo was taken. Evan leaned back. It would explain everything, the warnings, the threats, the demolition. If Wesley had been behind those failed renovations, and if Joy had come forward, they'd want her gone. Forgotten. And his kindness, one small act, had brought her back into view. Meanwhile, the tenants in Evan's building were starting to panic. Flyers had been slipped under doors. Notices taped to walls. Most didn't understand what was happening. They thought the city was fixing something, or doing renovations. Evan tried to explain, but few wanted to hear it. One father with 3 kids said, "Man, I can't fight the city. I just need a place to sleep." Evan felt helpless. Angry. But he didn't blame them. People were tired. Busy surviving. Then came the fire drill. It was supposed to be a routine inspection. But suddenly alarms were going off, and everyone was told to evacuate. The whole building emptied into the street, only to find the fence gates locked. One of the security guards on site looked confused. Another shouted for backup. It didn't feel like a drill. It felt like a test. Later, Evan overheard 2 workers talking. "Once the place is empty, they're bringing in the machines," one said. "Midnight crew, hush hush. No reporters." He recorded it. Posted it. And the next morning, a reporter finally called. Her name was Celia Grant. Independent. Ran a blog out of her car. She said she saw Evan's post and wanted to meet. When they sat down at the diner across from the building, she pulled out a worn leather notebook and flipped through pages. "I've been chasing Wesley for years," she said. "What you're seeing now, this isn't new. But it's gotten worse. Faster. Dirtier. What I need is a face. A human story. Someone brave enough to stand in front of the storm." Evan nodded. "What if I'm not brave?" She smiled. "Then be loud." Celia offered to publish everything. The videos, the emails, even the old audit file. She warned him it could get messy. "These people don't sue. They bury," she said. "But once it's public, they lose the power to hide." That night, Evan waited. Waited for Joy. For another message. For something to tell him what to do next. He watched the building from his window. The lights flickered in the hallway. A loose pipe banged somewhere in the walls. It was the kind of building most people would forget. But to Evan, it felt alive. It had memories. Stories. And it deserved to be heard. Just after midnight, he got a text from a blocked number. It said only this: "She's still alive. You're not alone." Evan stared at the screen, heart pounding. Joy was alive. Somewhere, somehow, someone was still looking out for her. And if that was true, maybe there was still time. Time to find her. Time to stop the demolition. Time to tell the truth. But deep down, Evan knew, it wouldn't come easy. Not with secrets buried deeper than blueprints and city permits. And definitely not when the only witness left was scared enough to vanish without a trace. But Evan was done running. He'd started this trying to help one person. Now, he was about to take on the machine. Evan didn't sleep that night. The message, "She's still alive. You're not alone," kept echoing in his head like a whisper he couldn't chase down. He stared at his phone, refreshing, waiting for more. But nothing came. Just silence. Outside his window, the bulldozers sat like sleeping beasts, their long arms curled, waiting. Somewhere out there, Joy was still breathing, and someone knew where. But they were hiding, or maybe running, or maybe being hunted just like her. He paced his apartment, avoiding the windows. Every sound from the hallway made him flinch. The footsteps. The elevator. The coughs. He wasn't sure anymore who was a neighbor and who might be watching. Marie had warned him that once he made things public, it could get real, fast. And it had. The blog post from Celia had gone live that morning. It didn't take long for it to spread. The title was simple: "The Woman the City Tried to Erase." It included screenshots of the permits, the photo from the envelope, the video of Joy. Within hours, people were talking. Sharing. Questioning. But the reaction was a mixed storm, some outraged, some skeptical. And others, silent. Strangely silent. Evan's phone started ringing. Activists. Journalists. A few tenants. One guy from a local tenants union wanted to meet. Said he'd seen this before. That sometimes, the only thing keeping bulldozers at bay was a camera and enough people watching. But by that afternoon, strange things started happening. The power in Evan's apartment flickered out. Just his unit. No warning. No maintenance notice. Then came the knock, soft, almost polite. A man in a suit stood in the hallway. Thin, pale, eyes too calm. No name tag. Just a folder in his hand. "You're trespassing," the man said softly, handing over a document. "This unit is condemned. Effective immediately." Evan didn't even look at it. "I live here." "Not anymore." Evan slammed the door. Locked it. Backed away. His hands shook. He called Marie, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Then Celia. Same thing. He tried the police. Reported harassment. They transferred him 3 times, then said someone would look into it. But no one came. By sundown, 2 more tenants had packed up and left. Others peeked through doorways, anxious, whispering. One woman knocked on Evan's door with her little girl clinging to her side. "They told me I'd lose my housing voucher if I stayed," she said, eyes wide. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Evan didn't. That night, he left his apartment. Disguised himself, hood up, glasses on. Took the long route, checking his back every few blocks. He went to meet the man from the tenants' union, David. They met in a church basement, folding chairs and black coffee, the kind of place where movement started. David was a quiet, intense man. Wore a faded windbreaker and carried a notebook covered in highlighter. He told Evan things that made his stomach twist. "This isn't about one building," David said. "Wesley's been buying up blocks under shell companies. Once people are gone, they erase records, rezone, rebuild. But they don't just push people out. They scare them. They ruin them." Evan asked about Joy. David didn't hesitate. "She used to work for a contractor tied to Wesley. She flagged safety issues, filed complaints. The ones that died in the collapse? She blamed herself. Tried to fight it. That made her a problem. They discredited her. Leaked medical files. Said she was unstable. That she lied." Evan leaned forward. "But she didn't?" David shook his head. "She told the truth. And she paid for it." He handed Evan a USB drive. "There's a file on here, sealed testimony from a deposition they buried. Joy gave it before she disappeared. You need to hear it. And if you're serious about helping her, you need to be ready." Evan thanked him, then left the church and ran straight home. He plugged in the drive. The file was audio only. Scratchy, broken at times, but unmistakably Joy's voice. "They told me to change the reports," she said. "Told me it wasn't my place to ask questions. But I saw how the walls bowed in. How the concrete was too thin. I wrote it down. I did everything right. And they punished me for it." The emotion in her voice made Evan clench his fists. "They called me crazy. Said I was stealing. I lost my job, my apartment. My name was on every do not hire list. I tried to find help. No one listened. Then, quieter. I know they want to erase me. I know they'll come after me. But if someone hears this, please don't let them win." Evan hit pause. The room was silent. She had been telling the truth all along. Now, he had proof. But something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too easy. And that's when the fire alarm went off. Again. But this time, there was smoke. Real smoke. Thick and fast, curling through the vents. Evan grabbed his phone, his laptop, the USB, and bolted. Outside, people gathered in the street, coughing, confused. The fire trucks arrived late. Too late. Smoke poured out of one of the first-floor windows. A storage unit. No flames. Just enough heat to ruin. By morning, the city had posted a new sign on the door. Unsafe to enter. Demolition to proceed immediately. No one answered the phones. Marie's number was disconnected. Celia's website had gone dark. Evan checked the news, nothing. No mention of Joy. No mention of the fire. Just another day in a city too busy to care. He felt it then, he was being cut off. Isolated. The silence was part of the plan. And Joy? If they found her again, there'd be no second chance. Evan had one move left. He pulled out his phone. Hit record. Looked straight into the camera. My name is Evan Marks. I'm a tenant. I'm a citizen. And I'm not afraid anymore. They tried to erase a woman who told the truth. And now, they're trying to erase me. But I'm not going quietly. He uploaded the video everywhere he could: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, even LinkedIn. Then he went live. Thousands started watching. Then tens of thousands. But Wesley was watching too. And as the sun rose, so did the sound of engines outside his window. The bulldozers were back. Only this time, they weren't parked. They were moving. Evan stood at his window, phone still in hand, heart pounding as the bulldozers crept closer. The street below was eerily quiet, except for the low hum of machinery and the muffled voices of men in hard hats waving orange flags. He had gone live just minutes ago, and the view count was still climbing. People were watching. Commenting. Sharing. But the machines didn't care. They didn't stop. Then came the sound that made him freeze. The intercom buzzed. No one used the intercom. He walked toward it, cautiously, and pressed the button. A familiar voice crackled through. Weak, but certain. Evan, it's me. It's Joy. His legs nearly gave out. He pressed the button again. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm close, she said, barely above a whisper. But I can't stay long. They know. What do they know? They know you found the file. And they're not just trying to scare you anymore. Evan looked out the window again. The bulldozers had stopped, but men were stepping out of a dark SUV near the curb. They weren't construction workers. No vests. No logos. Just clean-cut suits and dark sunglasses. Joy's voice cracked. They're not here for the building. They're here for you. Evan slammed his laptop shut and rushed out of the apartment. Down the stairwell, two at a time. He burst through the side exit and ran around to the alley where he'd told Joy to meet him. She was there, hood pulled tight, face thinner than he remembered, eyes alert. They hugged for a second, both shaking. She pulled back first. There's no time, she said. I came to give you this. She handed him another flash drive. It was scratched, taped together, and wrapped in a small paper towel like it had been hidden in a wall. Names, she said. Real ones. The shell companies. The city officials. Contractors. Even a few from the press. It's why they've kept me running. And why they're about to bulldoze your apartment with or without you in it. He pocketed the drive, then pulled her toward the back of the alley. We have to move. There's a church a few blocks down. Safe place. Cameras. People. They barely made it 2 blocks before the second twist hit. Sirens. But not fire trucks. Not ambulances. Police. 3 squad cars swerved around the corner, lights flashing. Evan and Joy ducked into a stairwell behind a laundromat. From behind the dumpsters, they watched the officers get out. One of them held a photo. Joy's face. Someone tipped them off, she whispered. Evan's mind raced. The video. The blog. The live stream. It had worked, but maybe too well. They were no longer fighting a demolition crew. They were up against a coordinated cover-up that went beyond zoning or construction. This was about control. Influence. Silencing anyone who threatened the illusion of progress. And Joy, now, was the key to all of it. They waited until the cops moved down the block, then ran again, through side streets and alleys until they reached the church basement. David was already there, pacing. When he saw Joy, he froze. I thought you were gone, he said. I was, Joy replied. But Evan didn't let it end. They plugged the new flash drive into David's laptop. Files appeared instantly. Dozens of PDFs, emails. Financial records. Payment logs. A private email thread between the head of Wesley Urban Development and a high-ranking city inspector, discussing the fast-track approvals for demolition permits, including the very one for Evan's building. Evan leaned closer and pointed. That's the inspector who showed up at my place 2 days ago. The one who said it was condemned. David's eyes narrowed. This is enough to burn them down. But Joy shook her head. Not yet. It's not enough to expose them. You have to stop them. Evan asked how. She hesitated, then said, they're not demolishing the building because it's dangerous. They're demolishing it because underneath it, there's something else. Evan blinked. What? Records, she said. Construction records. Blueprints. In the basement. From the original housing project built there in the 1970s. Those documents prove the land was federally protected low-income housing. They were never supposed to sell it. David's jaw dropped. If that's true. They committed federal fraud, Joy said. And they know if those documents resurface, everything they've built comes crashing down. Evan stood up. We have to get in before the bulldozers do. No, Joy said firmly. We have to go live again. Show everything. Expose the names. The plans. The truth. But as they debated, Evan's phone buzzed again. It was a message from Celia. A photo. Of Marie. Unconscious. Tied to a chair. No text. Just the image. And then a second photo. The front door, wide open. They'd taken Marie. And now, they were in his home. His heart raced. Joy saw the pictures and clenched her fists. They're trying to push you into hiding. Make you back off. Evan's voice was low, determined. Then they don't know me at all. He turned to David. Send the files to every contact you trust. Schedule it to release in 24 hours, no matter what. David nodded. Done. Evan looked at Joy. We're going back to the building. We're getting those blueprints. She didn't argue. And outside, the sky began to darken. Thunder rolled low in the distance as the storm closed in, both on the horizon and in the streets. But they weren't running anymore. They were going straight into the fire. Rain fell hard by the time Evan and Joy reached the building. The street was half flooded, the storm matching the pressure pounding in Evan's chest. The bulldozers were gone, for now. But security tape crisscrossed the entrance, and a temporary chain-link fence had gone up. Floodlights buzzed around the perimeter, casting harsh shadows across the soaked pavement. This is it, Joy whispered, shivering under her soaked hoodie. Whatever happens after this, we end it here. Evan didn't speak. He just grabbed the bolt cutters from his backpack and snapped the chain on the gate. They slipped inside the lobby, dark and quiet except for the dripping ceiling and the creak of waterlogged floorboards. The air smelled like damp wood and mold. Everything felt heavier, like the building itself knew it was standing on borrowed time. Downstairs was worse. The basement was flooded ankle-deep, and the power was still out. Evan led the way using the flashlight on his phone, sweeping the beam across the cracked walls until they found what Joy had described, a rusted storage room, half hidden behind collapsed drywall and forgotten paint cans. Inside was a steel filing cabinet, dented and dust-covered. This is where they buried it, Joy said, kneeling beside it. I used to do inspections here before I got fired. They never cleared this unit. Thought no one would ever come looking. She yanked the top drawer. Locked. Evan pulled a screwdriver from his bag and jammed it into the lock. One good twist, and it popped open with a groan. Dozens of manila folders spilled out, plans, forms, city permits all stamped in ink from the 1970s. One in particular caught Joy's eye. She opened it slowly, scanning each page until her hand stopped shaking and her voice came out low and certain. There it is. The clause. Property designated as federally protected low-income housing. Not eligible for private redevelopment until 2070. They sold it anyway. Built on top of. Evan took photos of every page. Backups of the backups. Joy pulled the folder tight to her chest like it was a lifeline. But just as they turned to leave, a sound cut through the still air, a single metallic click. Behind them, at the door, stood one of the suited men from earlier. Gun drawn. His expression didn't show anger or fear, just tiredness. Like this was a job he'd done 100 times. You really should have stayed quiet, he said. Evan froze. His mind raced. They were trapped. But before he could speak, another sound rang out, louder, sharper. Bang! The man collapsed. Behind him stood Marie. Soaked. Bruised. But alive. Holding a fire extinguisher she'd smashed over his head. She dropped it, panting. I told them I didn't scare easy. Joy rushed to help her. Evan pulled her into a hug, relief crashing over him like the storm above. We have what we need, he said. We end it now. By the time they reached the street again, flashing lights already filled the block. But not just cops. Reporters. Protesters. People who had seen Evan's last stream and showed up. The crowd was growing fast, blocking trucks, holding signs, chanting Joy's name. David was there too, holding a megaphone and a folder of evidence. The police tried to push through but couldn't. They didn't expect a crowd. And then the mayor's office released a statement, live on the city news stream. Due to new information brought to light regarding the legality of property sales and demolitions at the West Row housing complex, we are issuing a full investigation and halting all construction and evictions effective immediately. Cheers erupted around them. Joy fell to her knees. Evan didn't cry, but he came close. It was over. At least, it seemed like it. 2 weeks later, the investigation was public. Wesley Urban Development was under federal review. The buildings were safe. Former tenants were returning. Joy's name was cleared. Evan sat on the roof of the church that night, watching the city lights. Joy sat beside him. Marie, sipping tea from a thermos, looked up from her phone. "News says Wesley's CEO is stepping down," she said. "And 3 city council members just resigned." Joy chuckled. "I didn't think it would ever happen." Evan smiled. "It did because you didn't give up." They sat in silence for a moment. But then Joy's smile faded. She reached into her jacket and pulled out something small. A note. It wasn't new. It had been folded a dozen times. She handed it to Evan. "I found this in the folder. It wasn't addressed. Just, left behind." He opened it. "Read the one sentence scrawled in shaky handwriting. If you find this, you were never supposed to survive." Evan looked at her, his stomach turning. Joy nodded. "We exposed them. But I don't think we got them all." Far below, in the alley behind the church, a black SUV passed by slowly. "Nope." They watched in silence until it disappeared into the night. Because the truth had come out. But the people who hid it weren't done. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was already planning their next move. Evan folded the note carefully, his hands a little shaky, and tucked it into his jacket pocket. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the heaviness of everything they'd just lived through. He sat back on the roof ledge, his eyes drifting over the city skyline, lights flickering like stars that refused to burn out. Joy sat beside him, her shoulders finally relaxed, as if the weight of years had begun to lift just a little. Marie leaned against the wall behind them, rubbing her wrists where the rope burns had barely faded. "So, what now?" she asked, half laughing, half serious. "Do we just go back to normal?" Joy looked at Evan. Was any of this ever normal? He gave a quiet smile. "No. But maybe now we get to build something better." In the days that followed, news spread fast. Local stations covered the investigation around the clock. National outlets picked up the story, calling it the biggest housing scandal the city's seen in decades. Wesley Urban Development's CEO had stepped down, but not before issuing a carefully worded statement denying any personal knowledge of the fraudulent sales. Still, the emails Evan and Joy exposed told a different story. The shell companies were traced, and those involved in hiding the land's legal protections faced charges. City council meetings were now packed, and this time, people weren't just sitting quietly, they were speaking up. The building Evan had lived in was no longer slated for demolition. Inspectors reviewed every inch and declared it structurally sound. Residents who had been forced out were offered legal aid to return, and rent controls were reinstated. Even the neighborhood diner put up a sign in its window, "Welcome home, neighbors." Evan didn't go back to his apartment, though. It didn't feel like home anymore. Too many memories, too many ghosts. Instead, he moved into a small place across town, quiet, modest, with a view of the trees. But his phone didn't stop buzzing. Calls from journalists. Invitations to speak at community panels. Messages from strangers saying, "Your story made me believe again." Joy started working with a housing rights organization, this time not as an anonymous whistleblower, but as a face people trusted. Her name became a symbol in the movement, someone who hadn't run from the truth, even when it nearly destroyed her. She still carried the folder, though. Not because she needed to, but because it reminded her of what they'd been through. It reminded her to stay watchful. Marie went back to school. She'd missed her semester, but with the attention from the case, a local university offered her a full scholarship. She smiled more now. She was someone who'd survived and still showed up every day, a little stronger. The church that had given them shelter became something of a hub. Not just for worship, but for organizing. David helped turn the basement into a community center, a place where people could come to learn about their rights, read public documents, or simply find someone who would listen. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, that what started in silence ended with people finally speaking up. One afternoon, a boy about 12 years old walked up to Evan on the sidewalk. He had a newspaper folded under his arm and wide eyes full of nervous energy. "You're the guy who saved the building, right?" he asked. Evan knelt down. "I helped, yeah. My grandma lived there," the boy said. "She cried when she heard we could go back." Evan felt a lump in his throat. "Tell her welcome home." The boy grinned and ran off, and Evan stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing, heart full. Still, even as things settled, the black SUV never completely left his mind. Some nights he thought he saw it parked a few streets away. Other times, he caught the same number calling and hanging up. But no one ever came forward. No one ever made another move. And maybe that was the twist he didn't expect, that in exposing the darkness, you never truly escape it. You just shine a light big enough so others can see it too. On the one-year anniversary of the day he was arrested for helping Joy, Evan stood outside the building where it all began. There was a small gathering, residents, reporters, advocates, even a few kids with phones recording for their channels. Evan didn't prepare a speech. He just spoke from the heart. "A year ago, I was handcuffed right here. For helping someone. Just offering a coat and a warm meal. They called it trespassing. Said I interfered with city operations. But what we found out later, it was never about that. It was about power. Control. Greed. We weren't the ones trespassing. They were. On people's homes. On our voices. On our rights." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "But look around. They lost. Because we spoke up. We listened. We stood by each other. And I promise you, if they try again, we'll do it all over." The crowd clapped. Some cheered. A few people cried. As the sun dipped low behind the skyline, painting the windows gold, Joy stepped beside him. She didn't say anything. She just nodded. And Evan knew, in that quiet moment, that while they hadn't saved the whole world, they had changed theirs. It was never about going viral. Never about attention. It was about reminding people that no act of kindness is wasted. That truth matters. That standing up, no matter how small the gesture, can start something unstoppable. So when the cameras packed up, and the people drifted home, Evan stayed for just a little while longer. He looked up at the building, now with new paint, new life, laughter coming through the open windows. And he smiled. Because sometimes, the smallest actions spark the loudest change. And sometimes, standing up for a stranger ends up saving more than just